Welcome to episode 89 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I've been walking in these same woods for 4 days now.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and I don't do the woods. Sorry.
How many episodes have you mentioned that on now? I think there was one episode where you were going to go to the woods, but other than that, I think you're at like 11.
No, if I say I'm going to the woods, what I mean is it has to be a restaurant or a bar that's named the Woods. Or by some weird instance, I go golfing. And I say, I'm going to the woods, and I'm going to go get those clubs. But I don't golf, so that's the only way it would happen. I'm not going into the woods. It's not happening.
All right, then. So joining us today is Gracie from Sci-Fi and Scary. Gracie, thank you for coming to the show today.
Welcome.
So I'm pretty familiar with Sci-Fi and Scary, but I don't know if our listeners are. So if you want to tell us a bit about yourself as well as Sci-Fi and Scary, and I know you guys have some books coming out soon, so why don't you tell us about all that?
Okay. Sci-Fi and Scary, we mainly review and promote indie horror and sci-fi. We've branched out a little bit more lately now with other genres, but horror and sci-fi are still our number ones. And we have a book coming out called Twisted Anatomy. It's a body horror anthology, and all the proceeds will be going to the Pulmonary Hypertensive Association and the Domestic Violence Hotline. And it's cool. Available for pre-order right now on Amazon, actually.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome.
We will we'll try to post the links to that on our social media as well, just so that people can find it easier.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know, what exactly is body horror? Because, I mean, we have all these different genres within horror, where some may be more familiar with, like, today we're going to talk about found footage. But what exactly is body horror? And I guess what does the fandom, expect out of it or like about it?
I actually am not sure what people like about it, since it's not really a main one. So it's kind of interesting doing this anthology because we got through a lot of stories I probably normally wouldn't have. But body horror is more when your body goes awry in horrible ways, I guess. And tentacles can come from places they shouldn't come from.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. We covered the movie Society a while back. And like that's always the example I go to for body horror. I'm like, when you watch the end of Society, like that's body horror. It's people melting together and eating each other and faces coming out of asses and whatever else. Like just absolute insanity and things being ripped up.
Yeah, there are actually a lot of stories in it that, because when we went into it, I figured I'd be maybe a tiebreaker, but there are a lot of stories that I really did end up loving, and that kind of did surprise me a bit.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you kind of question going in, and then what I love about it is it really fits what I do, which is ridiculous concepts but deep stories, and people in body horror seem to really grasp that. Like they really like to hit you with this weird shit, but there's such a deep meaning to a lot of it, and I love that.
Yes.
Danger Slater is another writer who does a lot of body horror stuff that I just adore. So yeah, he actually did our Society episode now that I think about it. Anyway, so not body horror. The Blair Witch Project brings us here today. What is it about the Blair Witch Project that made it the one that you wanted to do?
Oh, it's been my favorite. I actually was what got me into liking found footage in the first place, and just all the media around it was very attention grabbing, and it's just one of my favorite movies. And I can kind of see why some people might not care for it, but it's just, I don't know, it has a really cool supernatural aspect to it, along with the found footage being pretty new at the time when it came out.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't understate its influence on horror. That's for sure. And I mean, I tell people straight out, I am one of the people that does not love the Blair Witch. I don't hate it, but it's not something I go out of my way for normally. And still, like, if you can't understand how it influenced everything, like I honestly believe that Blumhouse wouldn't be a business if Blair Witch wouldn't have hit at some point. And all of found footage owes everything to Blair Witch. The marketing was absolutely insanely creative and amazing. And the thing that I do love about it is that there aren't answers. The whole point of the movie was that it was a mystery. Sorry, the whole point of the fake documentary. But like even in the film, the point is there's a mystery and nobody has solved it. We're sitting here, 22 years later, and nobody knows for sure. And we're going to talk about our theories on the end. I'm sure I have some strong theories. Dawn has some theories. I'm guessing you do too.
Oh, yes.
And what I love about it is, even if we agree with each other, we're not going to agree on everything. And I think that is such a powerful testament to what this film has done and what it's how it's influenced everything. So, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say that the whole, I guess when you start talking about the marketing for this, that's the first thing I think about with this film. For my students, when I get to, reality within film or just history within film, right? The one thing I always point out is one of the most dangerous things that you can fall for, the most dangerous things that a movie production company can tell you is based on a true story or based on, the facts of whatever, right? And I give a few examples, and one of the examples I give them is Fargo, because at the beginning of this moment it's like, this is based on a true story, and it wasn't. It was a completely made up story that, in order to get people in the theater, they said was true. Now, years later, you have the Blair Witch Project, where they expanded on that to where, this isn't the early years of the internet. The early years, I guess, what you could say of social media, where you had, chat rooms and you had these, obscure websites and things like that, where you could go around and search for information, but you're not going to find everything. And it's so deep that, or at least the internet itself was so innocent at the time, or at least seemingly innocent, that if something was on the internet, you tended to believe what was being said, because someone invested the time, invested the money to put this here. And you could get people to easily follow along with whatever, conspiracy that you were weaving, right? So when this movie came out, it was pushed as, this is a true story. This happened to these kids. And they even had a documentary for the film that featured family members saying, like, I don't agree with this movie being released. And there was like a fake lawsuit that, was that apparently was linked to the documentary, where there's claiming the family was suing because they didn't want the footage to air. And there's this one, I remember it like it was yesterday, like one of the brothers of either Josh or Mike is like yelling at the camera crew that shows up. He's like, you think I want that movie shown? You think I want to go see that movie and see my brother die? And I remember having conversations with people. This was, a couple of years after Scream had come out. So that's the last big movie or horror movie I remember before this film. So people were like, holy shit. Oh my God, this is real. Like, you're going to be able to see like what happened to these people. It's a big mystery. You're going to have to try and figure out what happened to all of them. And after it gets its release, I think Sundance in January, then it gets a release in like June or July, and people start watching like, I don't know what the hell happened. And you would have people who saw the movie 2 or 3 times because you couldn't immediately go to the internet and find, somebody had pirated the movie and uploaded it. Yeah. And you couldn't freeze frame these things to where you could say like, oh, well, here's the witch here. Here's this. And it was magical and masterful because for about a month, they got away with it. They got away with this was a true story. They got away with everything the marketing was pushing because they weren't expecting, or at least from estimation, they weren't expecting this movie to be as big as it was, because I think it made like $250 million. off of a budget where I think when they started independently, it was around $30,000, $40,000. And then post production put it around like 300,000. They made a lot of money off this movie because people became obsessed with it and wanted to find out what the hell happened. And, you know, when the veil is pulled off and you see all three of the cast members doing interviews, and I think they were at the Video Music Awards. I mean, they were making all these appearances because at a certain point, people realized like, oh man, they really got us with this. You really sucked us into trying to figure out what the hell happened and being left in the lurch. Like, I don't know. I need some more information. I love the way that they played it. What about you, Gracie?
Yeah, I think so too, because like I said, I live out basically in the boonies where I didn't see anything on TV, nothing. So it took me longer to catch up that it wasn't real. But it was just so unique, I guess, in the way they marketed it. But also going off what you're saying, it made me about the playing based on true story on things.
Mm-hmm.
I play called Fatal Frame, and the first game says based on a true story, but
I remember that.
It's not at all. And they just slapped it on here for the Western market. I don't really know why, but that was actually one of the things that made me want to pick it up and play it. So it's a big draw. Thinking, you know, you're seeing the truth, I guess, of, you know, something that happened that you're wondering about and is a mystery. And
No, definitely. And I look at it also in the context of other stuff we had at the time. Like, I don't know if you guys watched them, but my friends loved the Faces of Death videos.
yeah,
It's like,
we had some.
right? Like, and so like I look at the context of something like that being around, and then this drops, and you don't know. And there were people who were like, no, that's fake. That's just a movie. And it made my friends who believe more. Like they didn't want to hear that it's not real because they want it to be real. And you have like the links that they went to with this film. Like at Sundance, they were dropping missing person posters of the cast. Like, help us find these people in case any of you know them or have seen them. And I mean, that's just so brilliant.
There's a book, too, which I have actually called like the Blair Witch Dossier with interviews and newspaper clippings and stuff like that. Kind of a companion to the their fake documentary on the Blair Witch. Yeah.
No, that sounds awesome. What's that like? Like, what kind of stuff is in the book other than like just...
It's very interesting. They put together like there's photocopy newspaper clippings and interviews and like bits of film, not like playable film obviously, but you know, still pictures. I can't think of the word, and stuff like that.
Huh. I haven't even heard of this. I'm gonna write it down and check it out. It sounds amazing.
By D.A. Stern is who writes it. He has another one called Shadows in the Asylum too that's kind of set up the same way.
So I love when film companies, or at least just those who are associated with the movies, find some way to create a world that's I guess that connects the real world with the film world, to where you do, as both of you are pointing out, you do have this segment of the population that no matter what, they're going to believe it. Like you have to have probably the cast members walk up to them and say like, no, this was just a movie. It wasn't real. No, bullshit. I saw everything that was going. Like, why did the cameras, and then it starts becoming one of these things that, the next movies then explain why, at least how they found the cameras and things like that. So I just think that it's really cool to get sucked into that, or at least get into that wormhole where you kind of question what reality is. And I'm sure, all three of us have been in that position where there was something out there and people were like, no, that's not what actually happened. And you just want to, no matter what, you can't be told that the reality that you've constructed based off of this is wrong. Like everybody else has to be wrong about this. And which is really cool. And also gives you, some insight into conspiracy theories, or people who are obsessed with conspiracy theory, or obsessed by conspiracy theories. because no matter how much data you show them, they're going to somehow believe that whatever it is that they found online is the truth, and whatever you have to say is, whatever level of evidence that you have, it's not right.
Well, and the fun thing with conspiracy theories for me is that it feeds into how real this must be if everyone's telling me that it's not.
Right.
And that's the thing I've always liked about conspiracy theories. It's like it's a self-prophesizing, like, continuous swirl, and I kind of dig that. I would say, like, I don't find this nearly as dangerous as a conspiracy theory could be, but I mean, I look at something like regardless of how you feel about J.K. Rowling, like how Hogwarts in Orlando or LA like lets you literally go into this world that you love, or like Galaxy's Edge lets you like literally go inside the Millennium Falcon or whatever else. Like, it's such a cool thing to be able to do. And obviously I don't want to go into the woods and hang out until my friend's teeth appear. But I don't want to be in the Saw basement, But yeah, okay. Well, I mean, you might, yeah. but no, like I think that it's a safe way to be overly into it. And the other thing is, if you take the witch out of this and you just go with the fear of being isolated in the woods and people dying, that's a universal fear that's been around since the beginning of time. Like, natives probably had stories about wandering off into the woods alone and what could happen to you. Like, this is such a classic use of fear, and it's budget friendly, but it's also timeless. This film will continue to mostly hold up. We might question the technology or whatever else, but it's going to mostly hold up for a very, very long time because that fear is universal.
It almost has a fairy tale feel to it. You go out in the woods and the witch gets you, like Hansel and Gretel and a lot of the old fairy tales.
Yeah. No, totally. And I mean, the English major in me is always obsessed with symbolism. And the symbolism of forest as a player in man versus nature has been around forever. Because no matter what we conquer, no matter how many buildings we build and how many we put our name on, how many buildings we build or how many cities, and we think, oh, we've conquered nature. I can kayak down this crazy river and I can climb this mountain. At the end of the day, nature always wins. And so using a forest is just constant symbolism and stuff, because forests are this place where everything disappears. You can't see what man has done. It's just you. And now you're really, really low on this hierarchy in the forest. And I've always done that.
There's that point where Heather brings that up, where they're arguing about where they are. And they say, oh, well, we'll keep walking and we'll find something. And she says, this is America. I'm sorry. She says something like, oh, this is America. We've torn everything down. I'm sure we'll walk and we'll be able to find something.
So it's very hard to get lost in America now.
yeah. I'm just like, and it is one of those things of like, you can still get lost in the woods. It happens all the time. I mean, you have people who get lost in a parking lot.
I was going to say, I live in Phoenix and every strip mall looks the same. So you could be in a strip mall and think that you're at one place and be at totally the wrong one. So
I'm talking to someone who got lost in a parking garage once. So I get lost very easily.
That's not that unusual, actually.
It's not. There's sometimes I write down, I'm like, all right, I'm at the Memphis airport. I'm by the saxophone. They each one of the floors is a different musical instrument, or you go to, any of the amusement parks and like, I'm in the Mickey lot. I'm like, I hope I can remember that.
Oh, man. But yeah, I love the isolation in this as well. I complain a lot about walking for an hour and literally nothing happening in this movie. And that's just the me that gets distracted easily and needs something always happening. So that's totally on me. I get why it works for other people. But at the end of the day, that is so strong in building that isolation and that confusion and that helplessness. And this movie would be nothing without it, as much as I might complain about it from a plotting standpoint. But yeah, it works really, really well.
Yeah, it still holds up. I think one of the great things about this movie is, and I think both of you mentioned technology, or at least aging of the film and things like that. I say this from time to time with films, and I will say the same thing with this one. It aged well because they specifically tell you this is 1994. We're not trying to make something that is universal to any other time. It's not like a time travel movie where they go forward and then you eventually get to that year and nothing looks like whatever it is, or just some of the I guess the universal stories, or at least the universal issues that are represented in the story, just fall flat. This one still works because there are a lot of things that I saw myself in their reactions, because I've been in those situations where you're looking for a car. I mean, not in the woods like they were, but you were looking for your car at Disney World, and where the car is. No one else, is listening to you, and that frustration kind of builds of like, I know it's over here, and you start walking, and then the people that you're with go in a different direction. You're like, what? Where the hell are you going? You're not going to get back to the car. Just that frustration, and plus with them, it's amplified because it's the three of them in the woods looking for creepy stuff. So you see how the stress, the anxiety, everything gets magnified. And then you have those other elements that come into play, which would be they don't have any food. They're cold. They're tired. I'm sure they smell because, they're wearing the same stuff.
And they really don't know each other.
Exactly.
Either. So they don't really trust each other to help them or to help each other.
Yeah, and even if it's just the three of them, it's really just the one of them, and trying to understand whether or not you can survive with the assistance of these people or survive on your own. Because going in that situation, for any of them and any of the issues that are related to their own existence or why they're there and things like that, you really start to question. I mean, one, if you're in that situation, you question how you would react, and you question how far would you be willing to trust anybody that, you're just trying to work on a project with. I mean, I hate group projects. I've always hated them. I couldn't imagine a group project that involves us, a film project that involves us going into the woods, because it's not going to end well.
I was reading, and I don't know if this is true, because that's kind of the joy of this film, right? Like, we don't know what's true and what's not.
Right.
But I was reading that while they were filming it, Heather brought a knife with her because she was scared to be out there with two guys. And I mean, I get it, definitely. But it's so interesting to me that I only half believe this. This is the most likely thing.
As a female, I actually fully believe it.
No, exactly. And that's my thing. This is the thing that seems the most likely to happen. I would absolutely do it in that situation. And I totally get why anyone else would. But this movie fucks with you on such a level that I even question that. And that's weird. Why do I question whether that's real? That's how much it messes with you. And I love that. But no, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I'm pretty sure she did. I just think it's interesting that I still question it.
Yeah, there are some things I've read, too, where I'm just like, well, are they just saying that? Or did they really do that? Or, I think it ages well, partly, too, because there are no, or at least very minimal effects to it.
Right.
And I think effects can really age a movie further than what it should be, and practical effects seem to age a lot better if they're done well than CGI does.
Oh yeah, definitely. CGI is outdated within a couple years, no matter how good it is.
Yeah, there are very few movies that stay consistently looking good, like say Lord of the Rings. That looks good even today, but other movies that came out at the same time don't look as good.
Yeah, they probably had a little better budget.
Yeah.
And more of an attention to detail, too.
Very true.
So, yeah, I do think that's why age is good, just because there's no effects to it, so there's nothing to really tell on the technology. They're just using what they have.
And even that, when Heather, or it might have been Josh, makes a comment about, oh, we're going to be hiking with, we got to get, we got to get our rest because we're going to be hiking with a lot of weight. And I immediately thought about, one is 94, and I was just thinking like, damn it. I mean, they're taking all these batteries and all this stuff that's with them, and the advances that we've had in technology since then are leaps and bounds beyond what they would have taken with them, to where you would have had your phone, then you would have had like 4 or 5 4K cameras that wouldn't even come close to the weight that the cameras that they were carrying with them, to where they could have gone out with smaller packs or smaller rucks and to go out and look for evidence of the Blair Witch. I mean, there are people who've been making movies or short films on their iPhones and Samsungs. So it's one of those things I look at. I'm like, man, you could probably do this today, but you'd have to complicate the technology somehow.
The third movie kind of does that. The Blair Witch movie, they use drones, and I kind of like, though, that they have like ear cameras, so it's a little bit more believable that they're still moving as they're running, because you can forget that kind of camera's on. But yeah, their drone gets caught in a tree or something really early on. They have to mess with some of their other stuff so they can't get help, obviously. But.
Well, yeah, and I loved how they did that because, again, you kill off the way the technology can assist you or help you, get out of whatever situation is going on. I mean, I would love for the Blair Witch just to start sending them weird messages on their on their Twitter or Facebook pages, like some other movies have done before.
See, I think that would ruin it for me, because in 5 years, I'm going to look at your phone and be like, that's your phone? And I'm going to look at your messaging system and I'm like, what the fuck year is this? 82? And like, yes, I know there wasn't one in 82. But I feel like when you get to that, you lose that thing that makes it special and timeless. And I feel like this movie came out at the perfect time.
Most definitely.
Because a few years later, or a few years earlier, I think that you have things that are no longer as universal, and they accidentally hit this really good sweet spot with it. The one thing I will say, like when I was rewatching it, my initial thought was, oh, their GPS would be so much better today. No, it wouldn't. They're not going to have signal out there. So
well, if they had a regular standard GPS, they would, because it would be tied to the satellite as opposed to using it on their phone. And I'm glad you brought up the GPS, because that was one of the things when I was watching, I don't know, like one of those I Love the 90s, one of those types of shows. It might have been CNN's The 90s, and they got to the part where they're talking about the Blair Witch Project, and actually they were talking about GPS. And then they linked it to the Blair Witch Project, and they were saying that this was one of the first movies that actually used it as part of the filmmaking process, to where the crew, or at least I think the director was sending coordinates to them and letting them know, oh, you need to go here. And then he started, and I may be misremembering this, but then he started screwing around with their coordinates and sending them different ones, to where they weren't sure where they were supposed to go. And that helped amp up the anxiety that they were having and the anger that they were having on film. And it immediately made me think of this one time that I was stuck in the same situation. We were, doing some field exercise in Oklahoma, and the command that we had kept sending different GPS coordinates, and it was all to screw with us. So, what was supposed to be like a 5-hour march ended up being like a 12 or 14-hour march, because they kept changing the location that we were supposed to go to. And at first I just figured, okay, well, they're being jerks about this. What they were really trying to do was, oh, well, things could change at any moment if you're in a war zone or whatever. So that was their rationale for changing the coordinates on us. It was to get you to that breaking point, which you see in the characters in this film, get you to that breaking point where you're either going to give up, turn on the people that you're with, or just keep pushing forward. And I thought it was a brilliant tactic by the filmmakers by doing that, because now that I know that, everything seems a little bit more real as far as the way that they are presenting their interactions on screen, because you see their frustration. You see them wanting to basically kill each other because the map's gone, the GPS is gone, they don't know how to work the compass. It's just one of those things where it was, like you said about perfect time, it was also a perfect strategy.
The reactions are good. I kind of think it's interesting how she sort of, like, Heather's and Josh are kind of antagonistic throughout the movie to each other.
Oh, yes.
And I do think it's interesting, though, when he disappears and she finds the little bundle, she's kind of, I don't know, motherly towards Mike. Like, she doesn't want him to freak him out any further, and she's trying to hide it from him so he doesn't see it. And I don't know, I think their interactions are interesting in it. And I think that makes up for the spots where it's kind of laggy a little.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I think a lot about my friends and if they were in these situations, right? Like, who do I want to be out there with? Who do I absolutely not want to be out there with? And then I think, you have like Mike, where they don't even know him, and right. Just like the weirdness of going out there, but you can't just leave. You're stuck there now. And you wouldn't be nice. I mean, I look at how people interact online when they don't know each other. You can't tell me that two people alone in the woods aren't going to go at it when they don't know each other, And it's an additional threat. Like, if you look at this from the point of view of somebody who doesn't believe in the witch but just went, then it has to be one of the two people you're with, and that one just disappeared, so that leaves you.
Right.
So I like how you have that could be a thing that's driving it. It could just be we've been walking for 16 hours. It could just be what the fuck is going on? I'm terrified. And it's this amalgamation of everything that's going wrong around them. And the reactions are very, very real in that regard. And I don't know how much is acting and how much is they were pissed off they've been out there too long or whatever else. But it really comes through.
During filming, they had to take Josh out, or they had him leave a little early. It was supposed to be Mike that left first, but they had Josh because him and Heather were just going at each other so hard. They actually cut out a lot of their arguing to get. Mm-hmm. So they asked him if he wanted to go first. And he was like, yeah, sure. And so I think a lot of what you see on screen is.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Not going by what they cut out and all that.
Huh. Don, did you hear anything about that, or did you know about this?
No. I assume that there were probably those points or those moments where they did kind of have some issues, but I'd never heard anything about it. Or, with 22 years later, I probably forgot about it just because of the hype and everything that was built up about the film and interviews and things like that. No, but I can't recall anything. But yeah, I could definitely see that because, James, as you and I've talked before, I've been in those situations when you are with people that you don't know. And you don't want to spend too much time with them, or you don't want to be in a stressful situation with them. And, there might be a little snapping. There might be some attitude thrown around. I'm not going to say I never did it. But yeah, I can completely understand that feeling of being with them, being out in the woods, but also being in a situation where, like, I just need to get the hell out of here. Like, I don't know what the hell's going to happen. So it's just one of those things that this film, it's not necessarily the witch that's the scary thing. It's the uncertainty and the unknown that's the frightening thing. And the uncertainty and unknown is coming from so many different directions.
And also too, like, as say Heather in the woods, she's out there with two guys that where Mike
Right.
might be worried about Josh, but he probably isn't too worried about Heather. Where she's got two people who could outnumber and overpower her if they really wanted to. So
Yep.
it'd be very tense.
Absolutely. I on the note of too much drama and anger and snapping, Don will never go into the woods alone with me because he wouldn't want to spend that much time with me when I break down.
No, I'd go into the James. I trust you. There are a lot of people that if this were like, some outing, like some writer's outing, I'd be like, you know what? Fuck you guys. I'll be at the hotel. I'm not doing this. Tell me about the cool stuff you guys did around the fireplace, but I'm not going out there.
The fireplace in the woods? That's a terrible plan.
I'm sorry, the campfire. Well, there are some fireplaces. If you find them, just be a little bit, stay away from them. Be a little cautious.
So one of the things that I really enjoy about this is the script changed numerous times throughout. Mm-hmm. Like you were just talking about Josh leaving instead, and I didn't know that. But like the ending was completely rewritten at the end. Like they were almost done filming and they were like, no, new ending. And that level of being able to take things out and put totally different things in is fascinating to me. There's a lot of stories that would completely fall apart. You couldn't just do that.
Right.
And this works in such a way where there's so much mystery. Like you don't have to have 1,000 clues planted along the way because you're not going for the payoff. Right. And right. I would argue clues are definitely planted around the way. We'll talk about that when we get to the end. But they went back and put them in. The Bill and Ted's put the keys there. Right. And the rest of the film is done in such a way that you could literally take the end out now and put in a different ending, and somebody watching it for the first time would just totally buy it. And that level of being able to
sorry.
Go ahead. No,
I was going to say, I've always kind of wondered if they cut it a different way, would it have worked as well? Because they had to have had a lot of footage that they didn't use. So it makes me wonder if it was edited a whole other way, if it could have just been a whole other movie.
And that's what's fascinating to me about it. I would like to see other endings. Like how Clue had multiple endings.
Oh, I love
if
that.
You could great. But if you could pick the different ending that you want to see, I don't know, whatever. But I think it's neat how this is set up in such a way where you can do that when you can't with other things.
Right.
Or at least not as easily.
The way they shot definitely allowed for much more fluid storytelling to change things as they went rather than had a set plan from the beginning.
I would actually like to read the original script and see what was there,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's out there. I'm sure I could. I just haven't.
I don't know.
All right, Don.
One of your theories might be confirmed with that, though.
My theory is what they redid, so that's what makes my theory work. All right, but we'll get to that. Anyway, what do you got in your notes, Don? I know you always have something interesting for me.
I got a bunch of questions, and I'll start off with Gracie on this one. So both of you can answer, but I'm going to start with the guest. This is that film that revived the found footage genre, because there are older films, things like Cannibal Holocaust, Green Inferno, and other films that kind of have that same, I shouldn't even say same, but they're of the found footage genre. But what is it about this film and the subsequent films like Paranormal Activity? Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose a bunch of them here. But films like The Blair Witch Project, Paranormal Activity, Cloverfield, what is it about found footage movies that is appealing?
Actually, I think I read a book about found footage, and they put in the terms of safe snuff films. And I think that's pretty accurate. It's you like seeing the danger and liking it feel real, but that it's not real, so it's safe in a way. And once I watched The Blair Witch, a couple years ago, I decided to try and watch a lot of the earlier ones. I watched Ghost Watch. I remember that caused a huge thing in England when that came out, and there's another one just before Blair Witch, and I can't think of the name of it right now. But it was supposed to be about the Jersey Devil. I'll say like the Lost Tapes, maybe. I can't remember the name, but I think that's why it appeals to people. I like it because it kind of makes the supernatural film, I guess. Or like, okay. I do think Paranormal Activity rode Blair Witch's coattails. I don't care for that movie that much. I think a lot of the ones after were really trying to recapture the whole sense of that it could have happened, and it did happen, but they didn't quite get there like the Blair Witch did.
My answer is more from a filmmaking point of view. I'm not a big fan of found footage. It's because I am, as anyone who listens to this knows, I'm obsessed with plot, characterization, arcs. And that doesn't happen as much. Like, it's still there, but it's never as developed. And that's important to the genre. Like, the genre works because it doesn't do those things. But that's why it doesn't work for me. And the reason that this is important is it gives you that amateur feel. It makes you feel like this could be real. I could be a part of this. It pulls you in more, like you're really there. Things are moving around like you're walking, or like, whatever else. Mm-hmm. To me, it's very similar to like a first-person shooter game, or that first-person perspective. Just like you feel more like you're a part of the action, and I think that's one of the things people really dig about it. Again, I'm totally the wrong person to ask because this is not my normal area, but that's my understanding and what I take from the parts I like.
Okay.
What about you, Don? Are you a fan of found footage?
I am, and it's not an issue of me ever seeking them out. Whereas I mentioned Cloverfield, I like at least the kind of what the two of you pointed out as far as being being able to see through that person's eyes, or at least their vantage point, their perspective. But then also, as Gracie said, the safe snuff film, where you just kind of like, well, it's a horror film. And there's also that element of danger and reality that's there because it's being presented as reality. And you have films like Unfriended, and I guess Unfriended Dark Web, and some more recent ones that Host, obviously, that just shot out this past year during lockdown, during quarantine and COVID lockdown. To take advantage of a couple of things, to give you that found footage film, and give you something that's relatable. So it's not, some three people going off in the woods to go find this witch. In that film, it's a bunch of friends that decide they're going to have a seance, but they can't hang out together. So, hey, we're going to do it over Zoom. But I think that the great thing about it is the found footage films seem to adapt to whatever time period they're in. And even with the technology themselves. So something like Paranormal Activity, you got the security cameras in the house, so it makes sense that you catch all these ghosts and everything that's going on, as opposed to, hi, my name is Mike, and I'm going to, grab my little camcorder, and I'm going to walk through my house and look for ghosts. You don't have to look for them because they're on the security cameras. So you have all these different ways that the technology gets used, or the stories can develop in order to have found footage be the delivery device, but have found footage not being the focus of the story. So I think the long answer is it gives you a way to actually see a horror film from a different perspective, and again, different vantage points, multiple cameras being used to where you feel as though you are a fly on the wall. And I think it's great. I mean, there's some really good ones. There are some bad ones. But I will even say, even with the bad ones that are out there, or the bad ones, depending on your perspective, the bad ones that are out there, it's still offering you something that you can look at and say, like, they did something different here, or they did something fresh within the genre of horror, and then also the genre of found footage films.
Well, like, you threw out Host, and Host is one of my favorite films of last year. So if we're considering that found footage, I think it definitely plays into my previous answer. Like, when I watched Host, I watched it on my laptop purposely. I watched it at the desk where I do Zoom calls. You know, like it was all about feeling like I'm a part of it and feeling that I'm literally on this Zoom call, you know? So yes, I think that totally fits. And I think that definitely just reaffirms my answer about, you know, wanting to be a part of it. And I totally get that. I don't feel it as much with other stuff. So there you go.
There's nothing wrong with that.
I think part of why I liked it too is because it was different, and I've been watching horror movies for like way much younger than I should have been, but like that, I was 19 when that came out, so I had watched a lot of them at that point, and that one actually got me excited to be watching it, I guess, you know what I mean? I was into it, and it was just something new.
Yeah, definitely.
When they're having the discussion, Mike, Josh, and Heather having that discussion about the camera, and I can't remember if it's Mike or Josh takes the camera and starts putting Heather on camera and says, "Oh, I understand why you like this. I understand why you like filming stuff, because, you know, now that I can see it through your camera, it's not quite reality. It's like a filtered reality." And I'm butchering the last part of the quote, but it was, "You can pretend things aren't the way they are." And at that moment, that's where so many things about the movie make more sense to me. And also the whole thing about the found footage genre, and especially with this film, the idea that the camera is presenting you with what the person is seeing, but not what they're actually seeing, if that makes sense. So they're out in the woods. You have all these noises. And even watching this film 22 years later, all the noises, all the sounds, the children laughing and all that stuff, I heard it this time, as opposed to the first time I couldn't hear it. And I was I saw it in a theater, could not hear all the laughing, and it was quiet. The audience didn't say jack the entire film. I mean, from the start of the film to the end, there was no laughing. There was no jumping from anything. I mean, there were people in the movie theater, like I could probably hear them chewing their fingernails. That's how tense they were while they were watching this. But there was no talking. There was no joking around, goofing, anything, right? But I couldn't hear the noises, and I'm sitting there getting frustrated. I'm like, what are they hearing? What are they hearing? But when I watched it again this time, and I've seen it a couple of times since then, since the first time I saw it. But when I watched this time, I could hear those kids laughing. I could hear everything that was going on. So all those extra things made me focus more on what they possibly were seeing or hearing or wanting to look for. And also the terror that comes from seeing all these stick figures, out in the woods, or seeing these rocks where, I watched it the first time, and then probably the 10th time that I watched it now, I still sit there. I'm like, don't mess with rocks, man. Just don't do it. Because when you see stuff like that, even now, not that I go hiking where I am, but whenever I go someplace and there's like rocks in a certain way, or even sticks, I'm like, I'm not touching it. I'm not, because as a kid, I probably would have kicked them over. As an adult, I look at it like, no, because my reality from that time period, from that age, is different. And as Heather is looking for more stuff, you start to figure out why she's doing it, or why she's stuck on it, is because it's not that she's getting, a high from doing it, which she probably is. But it's also this idea of she's looking for that thing. She's looking for something, and she knows she's going to find it as long as she looks at that. And if she looks at it with her eyes, it's going to be different than if she looks at it through the camera. With the camera, she captures it for more people. With her own eyes, she just sees it, and it's really nothing more than that. So, I mean, there are a lot of literary examples. One was the art of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, where the father is taking his son on a cross-country motorcycle trip instead of taking him by car, by plane, by train, anything like that, because he talks about the difference when you are sitting in a car versus when you're riding on a motorcycle, and not necessarily the feel, but the idea that you're there, you can see everything, and it doesn't feel as though it's passing by in a window or on a screen. And I think that's what Heather, at least what Heather's exposed, what's exposed about Heather is this idea that her reality is shaped by what she sees through that camera lens. And
sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, please.
I was just going to say, I also kind of feel like, when you get to a certain point, you're probably not making it out of there, and at least you're recording something for people to look at that they can say, okay, this is what happened to them. They didn't just fall in a hole, or, I feel like that's part of it near the end, is that it's not that she really wants to, but she feels like she should, just so people know what happened.
Oh yeah, especially that crying scene. Like the crying scene has been parodied so many times. I started laughing when I was watching it, and my wife looked at me. She was like, "What's so funny?" I was like, "I'm just thinking about that scene from Scary Movie, where they just they overdid the crying in the camera part, right?" And the crying scene that Heather gives is great because I couldn't imagine someone in that situation not breaking down. And it's a fantastic thing to include in a story, but it's also a great performance by her in that scene to really capture,
definitely.
And the apologies. Like I've never been in that situation where I was, virtually alone in the woods and vulnerable, and get to that breaking point like she does, and she's like, I'm sorry about this, I'm sorry about that, I'm so sorry, mom, dad, just everybody. You're like, I know this isn't real, but this kind of sucked me back in.
It's also where she's actually very vulnerable, because most of the rest of the time, even if you can tell things are bothering her, she's trying not to show the people with her. She's still trying to be the leader, so she's not trying to show them weakness, but it's the one time she purposely, I guess, does. And she does a really good job, too.
Oh, it's a great scene. I think it's, I think that this scene is why we're still talking about it. I don't know that the rest would hold up on its own. It's this scene that drives home the terror and that absolute I'm so fucked feeling. And just, again, her performance is amazing, but it feels so real. And I think that ties everything else together. The emotion that hits here, like you said, like the rest of the time she's powerful, she's in control, or she thinks she is, or she's giving that impression, depending where we are in the film. But this is the point where she lets everything down, and she's honest, and she's scared, and that's what gets us. That's the scene that twists inside of you, Right. And the end shot's cool, but I feel like without this, we wouldn't even care that this movie existed. It would be this cool thing we saw in the 90s, and I kind of remember that. What do you guys think of that? Do you think that's true?
I think it's pretty accurate. When I watched in the theater, it was really quiet, like Don was saying. There was only one part where, like, the whole theater just reacted with a and that was when Mike says that he kicks the map into the river. The whole theater was just like, oh my God. And I know that part always sticks in my head, too. I don't know why. Maybe just because it goes from, like, they're laughing, and then, it just twists so fast that...
I don't know. It's also just like it's that last little piece of the illusion of safety without the map. Like they were being screwed with the map, Right. And now that's gone, and that's such a powerful moment as well. Yeah.
Rewatching, I was actually, watching the part where they first notice it's missing, and Josh and Heather are arguing about it, and Mike's just kind of hanging in the background. I was just thinking how fucked up it was that he's just watching them go at each other when he knows the whole time full well what happened to it. I mean, he does try to break them up to get past it, but I'm just sitting there watching going, wow.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely one of those moments where you don't like him because just from the admission and I mean, you could say it's a number of things as far as the sleep deprivation, being hungry, being tired, all that stuff, factoring in, and leading to more frustration where it just says, "Oh, screw it, I threw that thing in the map. I threw that thing into the river." But yeah, I mean, James, you point out something that's very strong, which is they weren't doing that well with the map, but now that the map is gone, it is that last little bit of security and safety that they had, even though it wasn't getting them anywhere.
Yeah, it was still something to look at and say, okay, this is, where we're going. That's what this says, this piece of paper that's telling the truth, and then that's gone.
I just love how there's even the whole thing about who doesn't, not being able to read the map.
Yeah.
Because there's part of me that thinks that maybe all three of them didn't know how to read a map, and that and it's not even they're in that part of the woods where things are creepy and there's all this stuff going on, but maybe they're just getting lost because they don't know how to read the map or use a compass. And
it could be as simple as
things though that they're following
things.
the river and they keep circling to the same spot, which actually that part stuck with me too the first time I watched it. That's when I was like, okay, something else is going on then besides them just being lost. And they do that pretty subtly too.
And I totally think that it's the power of the witch that's doing that. I think that it's done in such a great way that you get to question it. Mm-hmm. But I do. I think that I mean, the other answer to me is that they're so dumb that they're like, walk towards the sun. And then as the sun moves, they keep walking towards the sun. And so they're no longer going in a straight line. That's the only other answer that makes sense to me. But yeah, I do think the fact that they get back to this exact place when they have been following the water and they have been basically thinking they know where they're going.
Right.
It's
too purposeful to me. I feel like it has to be a stronger power doing it.
Yeah, I think I fully support the supernatural explanation because one of the other ones I heard was that it was Josh and Mike's plot to murder Heather, and it's like, that just makes no sense to me. It's like, the most convoluted murder plot ever, and it just, I prefer the witch explanation.
We want to kill somebody. We're going to wait till somebody asks us to come out here.
Right.
And then walk around the woods for days and then never ever go back home. Sounds like the perfect plan.
Right? Like if you were taking her out there to kill her, like, wouldn't you take the map and take her directly to the house? There's no real point to walking her around that long.
No, it's like there's no witnesses, so it's like there's nobody you have to play, oh, we're lost for.
Yeah, you don't have to get her to the house to do it. Like, if the plan was legitimately to kill her, like, wait till she's sleeping in the tent. This isn't hard. Like, I don't know. That is one of the ending theories I read that I definitely did not like. I thought that was... And Mike isn't a strong enough character to me to be a killer. Like, he's too scared all the time and he's too jumpy by the noises, and it doesn't feel like overacting. It feels like overreacting, like he's legitimately terrified of everything out there. So I don't buy that.
Yeah, there's like a part where he said, she's saying, hey, I wanted to go get it. And she's calling him a chicken, which isn't exactly the nicest thing to do. And she's like, well, if it's people, he's like, well, if it's people, I'm not going to mess with that. If it's something else, I'm not going to mess with that either. Mike to me feels very much like the voice of the audience half the time.
Yeah.
Like, normal people would be like, why are you going out of the tent? You don't do that.
Yeah, wait till the bear comes in here, and then we'll deal with it. So while we're on this subject, let's just jump to the ending, because I want to talk about the other major theory, which is the one I agree with, and I want to know you guys' thoughts on it. I have always believed that Josh is the killer, but saying that, I believe Josh is possessed and he's the killer. I don't think Josh went out there to kill them. And it comes back to that story at the beginning when one of the guys is talking about, I think his name is Rustin Parr, something to that effect, and how he made children. He would always take 2 to kill. One had to stand in the corner and look away, so he couldn't stand their eyes on him, and then he'd kill the other one. I believe, like, let's say that this is all real. My theory is, and not just my theory, this is all over, but the theory I agree with, I think that you can't look because he's possessed with the witch, whoever it is. And that's why the other person has to look away when you make the kill. I don't know why you don't just kill the first one when they get there, or why you bring 2 to begin with. That part doesn't work for me. But I feel if you go with all of this, Josh gets possessed. His stuff was targeted, just his stuff. His stuff is the one covered in goo, and his stuff is rifled through. And so if Josh is the one who's possessed, he leaves. He pulls out his own tooth and some hair and pieces of his shirt and whatever else, and he leaves it in this nice little package. And we're supposed to accept that that means that he died, but it's just a tooth and some hair. That doesn't work for me. And so then
have to be his tooth.
Exactly.
I just saw this. Well, if that's supposed to be like an offering to the witch.
Oh,
I just saw it when you said it, but and I did not
like
know there was a tooth in there for the longest time. I thought it was like his tongue or something.
Well, they say that there's a tongue, like a piece of a tongue and some other stuff as well. But I'm like, that could be anything, and it could belong to anyone, like, I don't know. I'm no forensics expert, so I can't look at this and say without a doubt that's Josh's tongue. But so if he was possessed and then he's doing all the yelling and the getting them out there and literally brings them to the witch, it makes such sense to me that, you see Mike in the corner looking away. Heather walks in, gets killed, right? Because that's exactly like that story at the beginning.
I've always thought, too, that him being in the corner and that was supposed to be a reference to the Rustin Parr, and Josh being possessed and acting that out definitely makes sense.
And so the biggest evidence that I have that this is the way it is this was all added later. The ending that we got is the last thing made in the film. So they added this ending. And then the very last thing added, they went back and added the story about Parr. They hadn't shot that before this ending was done. And if that's true, to me, that's the evidence that this is what happens. But feel free to agree or disagree. Go for it.
I like that because it gives. I like it. It gives more of a backstory to just rather than a random witch in the forest. It kind of gives more of a lore to it.
All right. What do you got for me?
I have nothing. I mean, I think as far as what you pointed out and the idea that was added in after the fact, I'm convinced now. As far as what you stated. Yeah.
No, I want to fight.
No, there's no fighting here. We haven't been marching in the woods for 6 days and with no food or cigarettes.
No, but I didn't know that until today. Like, I just read that part today, but I have sided with this theory since the first time I saw it because I think it makes the most sense, and it's the most interesting theory to me. I don't like just the witch, because if it's just the witch, I don't understand why Parr was involved in the past. Whereas in this situation, it explains Parr in the past because the witch would have to possess a body to do it, or somebody would have to make a sacrifice to her, like if she's not doing it, however it works. Mm-hmm. And the other reason also that I read today, I didn't notice before, but Mike puts up no fight. He's just kind of there, right? And so the theory is like the witch is able to hold him in that position, like power-wise. And I thought that was kind of interesting. But again, nobody knows the answers, and that's what's great about this. So it's not definitive, and Don should have fought me.
No, I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to fight you because
some random YouTuber will.
That's about what I've always thought for the ending too. the other alternate ending I've heard was like a time slip back to Rustin Parr, but that really doesn't make sense with the house being so deserted and abandoned. You would think it would look, if it were a time slip, it would look like it did when he lived there. So
That'd be kind of cool.
Josh being possessed makes more sense than that does to me.
That would really give you that fairy tale feel too, you know? Like it's always been like this weird, creepy thing to me that like these witches have like the house is made of candy in the forest or that kind of thing, right? Like you'd get that feeling if this perfect house from the wrong time is there. That'd be really cool.
Yeah. I mean, just even the house being in the middle of the woods, period, is kind of creepy. And then, I don't know, the handprints on it were always kind of freaky looking.
I did love the handprints. I'd forgotten about the handprints when I was watching this, and when it hit, I was like, oh, that's cool.
I like, too, during it, as they're walking, it kind of seems like it's just almost one long day, because I think the black and white film works well for that, because everything is just so gray. It looks like there's no sun, there's no way to get a fix on their position. It's just nothing, I guess.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just one long day.
The way the film is shot, I remember one of the big complaints was that not that people were frightened or terrified or anything like that, but the film was giving people, or the movie when it was in theaters was giving people vertigo. And so there was like this big warning that if you're going to go, if you're easily, suffer from vertigo itself, like don't see this movie because the camera shaking and all that stuff is really going to disrupt you. But I think my last question I would have for the two of you is, what, as far as the events that take place in the film, would be your breaking point? I mean, to the point where you see, them fighting with each other or just giving up.
I think mine would be the map, honestly. That just the way he does it, and then lets them argue and go at each other, and then decides later to say it. Just I'd be done then. I just like,
James?
Mine would probably just be all the arguing. No, really though, like I would be the guy who's like, fine, fuck you all, and then I'd turn and go my own way in the woods, and either you're gonna follow me or you're not, and that would just be the end of it. I don't know. What about you, Don?
I think for me it would be the first time I heard some shit in the woods. That's assuming that I've even gotten into the woods with all of you.
Well, I felt like that was that had to be part of the question.
But yeah, if the first time I hear like children laughing or some noise out in the woods, I'm like, all right, as soon as I wake up, we're getting the hell out of here. Or in reality, I'm probably not sleeping the rest of that night. And then I would just kind of, like as you said, I would just start walking. I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm just gonna. I know north, south, east, west. I know not to follow the sun. Yeah, you guys have a good one. Enjoy meeting the witch. Have fun storming the castle.
I think of all the creepy stuff that happens in the woods, the kids laughing out there, I think was what got me the most. Because like branches snap when you're in the woods camping, right. And there are all sorts of weird noises, but kids should not be out in the middle of nowhere giggling. So I think that would freak me out the most.
I used to work at a psych hospital in Nebraska, and one night we heard laughter in the hall. Like it's like 3 a.m. because I worked overnight shifts, and it sounded like kids laughing in the distance, and it was the freakiest thing I've ever experienced. And yeah, so that would definitely do it for me in the forest. I'd be like, nope, I've played this game. I'm out of here. So, but then can I go anywhere? Because I don't know if you know this, but there were kids laughing in the forest. So where am I going? So who knows?
I think the biggest, I mean, even beyond the kids, my thing about being out in the woods, it would just be the three of us. Because I also thought about the size of the party that's involved here. It was like 10 people altogether. Because I think in the 2016 version there were like 5, right? I saw it a while. I can't remember. I know it wasn't 3. I don't think it was 3 people. It had to have been more.
Yeah, it was about 5 or 6.
Yeah. I think the size of the party would be a little unsettling for me. So if it was like 3 or 4 of us, I'm gonna have problems going out there. But if it's 6, 10 people, there's the security and the numbers. So if there is somebody out screwing around in the woods, and let's assuming there isn't some supernatural being, if there is somebody screwing out in the woods, that you're gonna be fine, or at least somewhat fine, as far as because you have more people with you. To where if it is somebody just messing with you, they're not going to do it for too long. Now, if they're really trying to intend some harm on you, I mean, it's just 9 people you have to outrun.
Oh my. Well, I'm screwed.
Look, you never know. Somebody might fall.
Yeah,
that'd be me. I'd trip on something for sure.
But yeah, that's all I got for that one, because there's some really great things of depth with this film, and I think there are a lot of movies that can be remade, and do get remade, obviously, as well as this film, or at least adaptations or updates and things like that. But I think this film I think you could really do a cool updated version of this one, still set in the 90s, right? So you don't have to update any of the technology, but just something that follows that same line where it's 3, 5 people, whatever, going out there, and then you have a different ending, or it's a different group that's going out, perhaps in the 70s, and it's not going to be a found footage film. It's
the game kind of did that, actually.
Oh, yeah.
It was a really good one, but didn't really it was a good psychological horror game that used the woods well, but it didn't really feel like a Blair Witch game, if that makes sense.
Right.
She was kind of secondary to the plot, but I think they set around the same time and tried to at least give it the same feel.
I never played it, and I don't know. Would you want it to be remade? That's the question. I personally feel it would lose a lot, and I don't. I mean, I know it's been done. I'm saying, I didn't even want that. Do you want any in the future, or do you think that it should stay as it is and people should go view that one?
I actually think movie-wise, no, they should just leave it alone after the 2016 one. I actually like the sequel, Book of Shadows. I know that gets a lot of hate, but I actually really like it as a movie. And I thought if there were certain things that were cut out, it could have been a really good movie. But I didn't like the 2016 one at all. I just didn't like it. But
you're not the only one. I forgot I did watched it.
I've never seen it, so.
I would love to play more games based on it, though. I think they could do a lot of really cool stuff with that.
Yeah, that would actually be pretty good, because I think that the game Until Dawn that came out, maybe, oh gosh, it might be 10 years now, but it had Rami Malek and Hayden Panettiere. I'm gonna butcher her name, but they did a really good job of doing something that was similar to Blair. It was a bunch of friends that were going up to hang out in a cabin.
Yeah, they did the cabin in the woods slasher movie kind of thing, and then the same company made the Dark Pictures anthology, Man of Medan, and that's kind of set on a ship and kind of reminds you a little bit of Ghost Ship. And their new one, Little Hope, is set kind of like a Salem witch trial thing. They're really good games. They're fun.
So I'm gonna have to wait till another break when I can just go ahead and jump back into those. But yeah, I think gaming. You're right, with gaming and virtual reality. There are a lot of different opportunities.
Awesome. My son just bought his girlfriend a VR set, so we've been playing a lot of games in that. And weirdly, the scariest one so far has been Five Nights at Freddy's. We played one called Pagan Peak, where it's supposed to be more realistic, and that one really wasn't that scary. It was fun as an escape room thing, but the Five Nights at Freddy's, it feels like they are there and outside your door and just ready to bite your head off, and they feel big, and that is the only one so far that has actually made me jumpy and nervous, and I don't get scared at games very often anymore, and it really surprised me that that scared me. So I think they could do something really cool with a Blair Witch themed one.
Wow, that's cool. All right, so I think that's a great place to wrap it up. So first, Gracie, I want to thank you for being on this episode with us and making me rewatch it.
For having me.
Like I said, I'm not a huge fan, and I probably wouldn't have gone back to rewatch it. But rewatching it gave me a different perspective, and also really just drilled in just how creative this was for the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at it and I look at everything it's influenced, like it's crazy how this little film that probably shouldn't have worked, like, changed the industry. Like, when I say I don't think Blumhouse would exist, I mean, this film taught us you can shoot cheap, you can make your budget stretch like crazy, and you can get a huge payday from it. And that's the Blumhouse model, you know? So I don't think that the influence of this can be understated. So, yeah, just amazing. Thank you for making me rewatch it. With that said, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you online, and tell us about the pre-sale for the book again, and whatever else you want to talk about.
Okay. You can find me at GracieKat13 on Twitter, and you can find the Sci-Fi and Scary site at Sci-Fi and Scary on Twitter. And we also just launched a YouTube channel and did our first upload. It's Lillian reading Witness Bearer by R.J. Joseph from Twisted Anatomy. So for that, like, we literally just uploaded it right before I started this call with you guys. So
that's awesome. Very cool.
And yep, you can find Twisted Anatomy at Amazon. It's up for pre-order.
Awesome. All right. So I guess that wraps everything up. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I'm Don Guillory, and I'm still not going to the woods.
Well, then I guess we'll see everybody here next week at thenecronoma.com.